speaker, Dr. Vigneshwaran G. He is our junior consultant in pharmacology at Narayana Hrudayalaya. So, as a part of our basic sciences, it's a pleasure to introduce him, and he'll be speaking today on general pharmacology and drug development. As you all know, ev- every class what we do on these weeks on Tuesdays between 4 and 5, it's important for the basic sciences, and most of the topics which we have chosen is for your basic sciences. So over to you, Dr. Vigneshwaran. You can start and we will be hearing you.
Thank you, sir. I'll just share my slides.
I request all the residents to mute mute, and you can type any questions in the chat box, and at the end of the class we will surely take your questions and ensure all of you go back with a good scientific session. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Vigneshwaran.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Am I clear, sir?
You're very much clear. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Very good evening to one and all. First of all, thank you, sir, for having me on this session. For the next 45 minutes or so, we would be discussing on general pharmacology and drug development. As a pharmacologist, even I know general pharmacology is not the most interesting of the topics. So don't worry, I will not be boring you with too much of theoretical information. We'll focus on something, the applied aspect of which will be useful in your day-to-day practice. So these are some of the topics that we would be discussing in the next 45 minutes. We will be talking about therapeutic drug monitoring, pharmacogenomics, medication errors, and little bit about drug development. So to start with, we'll discuss two scenarios. The first scenario is about a 45-year-old male who was started on oral phenytoin for seizure disorder. The patient initially responded to treatment, and after that he stopped coming for regular follow-up. After 6 months, he again presented with an attack of seizure to the neurology OPD. So this is one scenario. The other scenario is a 25-year-old male who was started on phenytoin and the patient responded to treatment. However, subsequently, he developed some side effects, namely gum hyperplasia and coarse and facial fissures. So basically, these two scenarios, they highlight about two aspects. The first aspect is a patient who initially responded to treatment but subsequently did not come for follow-up, and then he had a recurrent attack of seizure. The second scenario is patient responded but he is having side effects. So this is something that you come across in your day-to-day practice. And what is the importance of this scenario in our topic is therapeutic drug monitoring. So basically, by use of this approach, we may be able to find an answer to the above two scenarios. So many of you would have heard about the term therapeutic drug monitoring. It is basically measurement of drug concentration in the body fluid to aid in the management of drug therapy. Okay. So when do we need this? What will be the clinical scenario? So one scenario is when the patient is not responding to treatment. When you think the patient is not responding, it may be because he is not taking the medicine regularly or because he is resistant or not responding to the medication. The presentation would be same, but then these are altogether two different entities. So this is an important place where you can take help of TDM. The other scenario is where the patient responds to treatment but has adverse effects. So you will not know to what extent you will have to reduce the dose. So basically to optimize the dose, we need this. So basically there are scenarios where you measure the patient's
Dr. Vignesh, we can't hear you. Hello? Hello, Dr. Vignesh?
Dr. Vignesh, we can't hear you. Vignesh, are you there? Dr. Vignesh? Vignesh? Dr. Vignesh? Vignesh?
Somebody please phone him up.
Wait, we are calling. extremely sorry for this one. We don't know. I'm just trying to call Dr. Vignesh. He'll be back in 2 minutes. Please bear with us.
Hello.
Vignesh sir, please start, sir. Please continue, sir.
So we are in the second scenario. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Perfect, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for that. So we are in the second scenario where a patient is started on warfarin. We are not sure why he has not responded. So probable reason could be pharmacogenomics, pharmacogenetics, any mutations which influence the metabolism of the drug. So what is pharmacogenomics? Pharmacogenomics is basically study of genetic factors associated with variation in drug response. So we all know drug will be safe for a drug to act in the body, it will get metabolized and then it acts on the specific receptors. When there is any, all these enzymes and receptors are coded by specific genes. So whenever there is any mutation in this, that it can lead to altered response. So this is called as genetic polymorphism. So this can lead to two aspects. One is lack of a clinical effect or treatment failure. Other thing is it can predispose someone to more side effects. So in the previous scenario, we have seen that the patient has not responded to treatment at all. It can lead to treatment failure. So accordingly, we will have to investigate the patient and then proceed for further management. So you can either avoid those drugs or you can increase those dose of the drug or decrease the dose depending on the scenario. These are some of the examples for drugs that we commonly use which are associated with genetic mutations. Azathioprine, which is associated with TPMT mutation, thiopurine methyl transferase mutation, and in those individuals it can cause bone marrow aplasia. Irinotecan anti-cancer drug can cause neutropenia. Warfarin, depending on the mutation, can lead to increased risk of bleeding. Clopidogrel, similarly, when we use in patients with coronary artery disease, if they have Cyte2C19 mutation, may not respond to treatment and can have treatment failure. So what do we do is, in your day-to-day practice, you need to be aware of some common drugs which are associated with genetic variations. So that depends on your specialization. So you need to be aware of some specific drugs which are associated with it. And then you need to know when or whether it is indicated to do a testing before you start the treatment or during the course of treatment. So there are certain recommendations for that. This chart shows few examples of that from the FDA. So these drugs, FDA has given classification as required, recommended. So basically, if a drug falls into the category as required, it is you need to do a testing for pharmacogenetic marker before you start the treatment. Recommended is optional. You can choose depending on the scenario. These are some examples. Say, for example, cetuximab, you will check for EGFR expression. Trastuzumab, everyone knows HER2 overexpression. Carbamazepine, you will check for HLA mutations. So these are some examples for that. So that is about pharmacogenomics or pharmacogenetics and therapeutic drug monitoring. So we'll move on to the next interesting topic, very important topic. What we can see here is this picture says it all. The patient was prescribed gabapentin tablet. However, the pharmacist dispensed him gemfibrocil. Okay. So both the drugs, why did it happen is both the drugs look very similar. Okay. So this is a very common scenario in day-to-day practice. This brings us to the next topic, that is medication error. Okay. So what is medication error? Medication error is defined as failure in the treatment process that can lead to or has a potential to lead to harm to the patient. Medication error is a common condition. Okay. The prevalence of it ranges from 5% to even 30%. The prevalence increases with the increase in the number of dose and increase in the age of the individual. Okay. So if say when we tell the prevalence of prescription error is 30%, it means out of every 100 prescriptions that we write, there is a chance of error. 30% or 30 patients have some sort of error in their dispensing or medications. Okay. So what are the different types of medication errors? So broadly, we have prescription errors, transcription errors, compounding or repackaging errors, dispensing, administering, or monitoring errors. As you can see here, the most common type of error is administrative error. Like when you prescribe a drug in a ward, the sister administers it, but there can be some error in the way it is administered. It can also happen when the patient takes it by himself also, when you do not give proper instruction. The other common errors are transcription errors and dispensing errors. So what are these types of errors? Prescription error is when there is an error in your prescription. It can be due to a spelling mistake or your mistake where you miss a zero or you do not write the dose properly. Transcription error is when the information is transcribed from the prescription into another database. When there is an error in that, it's a transcription error. Compounding error is when you prepare the medicine. Dispensing error, we just saw a scenario. So when you write for some medicine, patient asks for it, but the wrong drug is dispensed. Administering error is again common. It refers to the way the drug is administered. Say if you have written the drug should be given subcutaneous, but by mistake, the patient had taken it IV or IM, or someone had administered it as IV or IM. It's an administering error. Monitoring error refers to failure to follow specific protective mechanism. Say if the drug vial should be wrapped in a brown cover, or you need to check for blood glucose level before administering insulin. When you are failing to follow that, it is called as monitoring errors. So you need to be aware of the different types of errors that can happen in your scenario. So take it from me, it is very common and it happens when you handle so many patients, especially in a stressful condition such as an emergency department or MICU. So how do you prevent it? You need to be aware of the causes that are leading to it and understand some common precautionary measures. The common mistake that we do is poor communication. So when we are instructing to our subordinates or to our colleagues, we do not give them proper communication. We assume that they have understood it. Okay. So the recommendation is that you always give it in writing, or when you have to give it by oral, you make sure that the patient is understood. You ask him to repeat it. Then the other cause is ambiguity in writing or ambiguity in the names. So that is again a scenario which we saw before. Sometimes two different drugs will look quite similar. Okay, so you need to be aware of it. Then the other thing is misunderstanding of the direction. Say you do not instruct the patient properly on when to use the medication, whether it should be taken before food, after food, whether it should be taken daily or once a week. Methotrexate causing liver toxicity is quite common because many times patient, instead of taking the drug weekly, would have consumed it daily. If at all the patient is aware of the instructions, he would have avoided it. So these are some common causes. So how do you minimize these errors? These are some key recommendations from WHO. One is having a legible handwriting. So many of us have that problem, especially when you write in a hurry. So a good idea would be to give the instructions in capitals so that there will not be much confusion. Then giving a clear oral communication. Writing the order completely. So you give proper instructions till how frequently it should be taken, what route it should be taken, how long it should be taken. Any precautions also you need to instruct. Then avoid using abbreviations. Try to use generic name as much as possible. Specify the route of administration. Specify the drug strength. And these are some examples. Say instead of writing 1.0 milligram, write it as 1 milligram. Because many times patient would miss, or the doctor, the treating physician would misunderstand as 10 milligram if they miss the decimal point. Again, write it as 0.25 milligram, not 0.25. So what will happen is people will tend to miss the decimal point and they will give 25 milligram. So these are some common mistakes that you need to be aware of. Then again, units, when you mention, write it as 10 units rather than 10U. So what happens, sometimes patient would understand it as 100. So this U will look like 0 for them. Okay. So these are some precautionary steps that you need to take. So this is about prescription errors or medication errors. The other aspect that you need to be aware of is LASA, look-alike, sound-alike drugs. In your practice, day-to-day practice, you need to be aware of some look-alike, sound-alike drugs. Say, for example, these are some examples of sound-alike drugs. Say carbamazepine, carbimazole. So there is a chance you tend to make mistake when you are instructing someone. Chlorpromazine, chlorpropamide, clotrimazole, cotrimoxazole. So these are, you need to be aware of some common examples like this. And these are again some more examples. Say difference between, so you need to be aware between trazodone and tramadol, midazolam and dexamethasone, looking very similar. And if you notice this, most of the drugs that we see are commonly used in an emergency setup, either in emergency department or anesthesia department or MICU. So that is why you should be even more careful. Just by mistake, if you change the drug, can lead to loss of life. So how do you be aware of this? One thing that you can do is, depending on your specialty, you see, usually in hospital also as a practice, they will make a list of these drugs. If not, you need to be aware in your own setup, what are some drugs that look very similar. So you need to exercise caution when you are using it. And then you can also paste it in the notice board so that everyone would be aware of it. So this is about the first aspect, general pharmacology. So we discussed about therapeutic drug monitoring, pharmacogenetics, and then something about medication errors. The last aspect is drug development. So in drug development, basically, you know, drug development is the process that are involved from getting a drug, identifying a molecule which may be effective, doing some preclinical studies, confirming it in humans, doing a large scale study, getting permission, and then bringing it to the market. So there are a series of steps that are involved, especially in a scenario such as COVID. To develop a vaccine or to get a drug for treatment, it goes through these phases. So we'll discuss in short about the phases of clinical trial, then how to assess the quality of a trial. The last thing would be on CTRA, Clinical Trial Registry of India, which is very pertinent for your thesis. So this is some scenario which you would have already come across or which you will come across in your practice. In your OPD, a medical rep would come and say that he has a new drug for approved for a condition, say for example, pneumonia. He would claim that it is very effective compared to the standard drugs. It is also cheaper than that, and he will insist you to prescribe it. So how do you go about it? See, when a medical representative comes and informs you, see, most of us, we upgrade our knowledge from these medical representatives. The newer drugs, if you are not updated with the news, we usually hear from this medical representatives, and they will always tend to promote it. So how do you decide whether the drug that he is showing is really effective and you can choose it as an alternative or not? How do you decide it? So we will be discussing some of those. So this, to start with, this picture tells about the stages that are involved in the development of a drug. To start with, you identify a lead molecule. So you start with a target. Say for example, in COVID, you identify ACE2 receptor. Then you identify what are the structures or ligands that are active on that. So that will be your lead molecule. Then you develop some proof of concept. You do some in vitro studies to see if it is binding to that receptor or not. Then you do an animal study, preclinical study, to see if the drug is safer and if it's having any preliminary clinical effect or not. Then you go ahead and start the clinical trial. So before starting the trial, you will get permission from the regulatory authorities. So typically there are 4 phases. Phase 1 to 3 is done. Then you get marketing approval, and phase 4 is usually done after the drug comes into the market. Remember that. Phase 1, you typically do it in healthy volunteers to see if it is safer to use. Then phase 2, you do it in smaller number of people who are affected. Phase 3 will be large scale study. So this is again a re-emphasis of that. So phase 1 would be done in a smaller population, usually healthy volunteers, except in oncology trials. Phase 2 would be done in patients who will benefit. Say for example, if you are looking for a molecule for diabetes mellitus, phase 2 would involve patients with diabetes. It would be usually a single center or a limited number of centers with a smaller sample size. Once when you find which dose is effective. So usually in phase 2, you will try different doses. You will try 2 to 3 doses and see which dose is having a better effect. And then you will use that dose for your phase 3. It is typically a multi-centric trial. It is done in hundreds to thousands of participants. Here you try to include as many patients as possible. Once when you find the drug is effective, you get permission from the regulatory authority to market it. That is when it comes to the market. So once see that the drug development process doesn't stop with this. Even after the drug is available in the market, you look for its safety aspects. That is called as post-marketing surveillance. So basically the reason is that when you're doing a trial, you test in a smaller number of patients, and then you usually exclude elderly people, you exclude those who are having other comorbidities and all. But in real life scenario, when you want to use the drug, you will be giving to those people also. So you will want to know if it is safer in this group of patients. Also, you will also have a chance to find if there is any rare adverse effects. So phase 4 study is also as important as phase 3. So this is about the different phases of clinical trial. I'll just skip this part. So having known about the different phases of trials, another common scenario that you encounter is your journal club. So most of us have a journal club in our hospital. What typically happens is you present a paper which is say for a new drug, for example hydroxychloroquine, getting published for its efficacy in COVID scenario. Okay.
Just to mute your, requesting all to mute your response, please.
Okay, thank you. So you usually come across a scenario in your journal club where you have a drug that is being approved for a new condition. So you will be very much tempted to use that drug in your practice also. So you will go and you will tell to your HOD or your friends that, see, I found a study which is being published. They tell this drug is effective for this condition. So we can also start using it. Then your friend will show another paper telling, no, I found another study telling this drug is not effective for the same condition. So what do you do now? So you have two studies. One is telling it is effective. Another study is telling it is not effective. So how do you decide what to do further? So that is where you assess the quality of evidence. So basically, how do you assess this quality of evidence? You see how the study was conducted. So for that, you need to understand few key terminologies, especially for a randomized controlled trial. Okay. So what is a randomized controlled trial? See, you do a trial where a patient gets randomized, means the patient will have equal chance of getting a standard drug or the study drug. Okay. And then you can give the drug in two ways. It can be a blinded study or open label study. So that you should be clearly mentioned. So if the patient doesn't know what drug he is receiving, then it is said to be a blinded study. If he is aware of what medication is receiving, then it is a open label study. Similarly, there is another term called allocation concealment. The way how you give the medication to the patient, how it is allocated to them. So these details should be clearly mentioned. The type of randomization should also be mentioned. You should also mention about the sample size that you have used and a justification for that. See, one study would have used 30 patients in two arms. Another study would have used altogether 100 patients. So 100 patients in two arms. So you need to have a justification, or you need to understand whether the study had enough power. Power basically refers to ability of the study to detect an effect. So whether there is enough number of sample size. So when you publish it or when you write it, you need to mention about that also. You should also see if there was any loss to follow up during the study. So you might have started with 100 patients, but when you finish the study, there were only 50 patients who completed the study. That means there is something wrong. Either the drug had so many side effects or the patient did not want to continue with the drug. Okay, so that is another point that you need to look for. Another common mistake that we do is selective reporting of endpoints. See, it's a practice, it's a tendency for us. When you write a protocol also, you have so many objectives. Okay, you might have 3 objectives for your study, and when you analyze the result, you find that your only one of your objective is fulfilled and the other 2 objectives were not fulfilled. So what you will tend to do is only write the positive findings in your study. That should again be avoided. So how will you know if someone has only reported the positive finding and they have not missed the negative finding? So that is where we have CTRA, Clinical Trial Registry of India. So what that basically means is, whenever you are doing a trial, whether it can be a company sponsored trial or it can be even a DNB thesis, when you're doing a trial, once the protocol is approved by the ethics committee, you need to register your trial in CTRA website. Okay, so what happens is, when you complete your study and when you are publishing it, the editor will compare your manuscript with your protocol submitted in the CTRA. He will make sure that there is no major difference between your protocol and your manuscript. Okay, so based on these things, you will be able to tell if the study is properly done or not. So you might tell it as a trial, but you would have not even randomized the patients, and there might be more dropouts. So then you will know, okay, probably this is not a good study. So that is how you will assess the risk of bias in the study. So I'll just introduce you to another terminology in clinical trial. Okay, so when you look for studies for a journal club, you might come across these terms: superiority trial, non-inferiority trial. So what does it mean? Say when you want to tell, say drug A is better than drug B, you will tell drug A is better than drug B, then it is a superiority trial. Say if I compare HCQ versus a placebo and tell HCQ is better than placebo for preventing COVID illness, so then it is a superiority trial. Many times, see, now we don't have much drugs for treatment for COVID infection. Subsequently, what will happen? You say, for example, for swine flu, you have a drug, say oseltamivir. Initially, they would have done a trial comparing with placebo or with other standard care to tell this drug is superior. Okay. Subsequently, what happens? You will have other drugs also coming into the market. So you will have after oseltamivir, you will have zanamivir or some other drugs. So it is not possible for you to do a superiority trial every time. You cannot prove drug B is better than drug A, drug C is better than drug B all the time. So what we will do is, we'll just tell this, say drug B is also as good as drug A, but it is cheaper or it is with lesser side effects. So when you do that, it is called as non-inferiority trial. So that is also accepted in practice. So remember this word, non-inferiority trial. So when you tell new antibiotic is better than old antibiotic, it is a superiority trial. When you tell new antibiotic is at least as good as an old antibiotic, but it is more cheaper, then it's a non-inferiority trial. So the last point is registering your study. So this is the website of Clinical Trial Registry, CTRI, Clinical Trial Registry of India. We also have clinicaltrial.gov, which is used in US. It's a free site, online portal where you can register your study. It's an initiative by ICMR for registering a protocol. It is since 2007. The current recommendation is any trial that you do, it should be registered in CTRA before you start it. They will not allow you to register once you have started the study. So why this is important? If you are not registered in CTRI, after doing your thesis, if you want to publish it, the journal editor will not accept it. It will not be considered for publication. So always remember, trial, you need to register in CTRI. The objective of bringing this is it improves transparency of what you are doing. Okay, so basically, many times what it happens is when you write your protocol, you start with an idea, but then when you are going ahead and doing your study, you will forget what is your main objective. You will collect some data and then you will analyze it in a different way and publish it. In order to avoid that, to ensure the transparency, this has been brought in. So this is in short about clinical trials, drug development. So this I will conclude. Just before stopping, I just have a couple of questions for you all. So you can just have a look at this. There are just 5 questions. It will just take 2 minutes of your time. You can just read this and then you can just try to mark the answers for this. The first question is trough level in TDM, therapeutic drug monitoring, refers to which among this? Lowest concentration reached by a drug before the next dose is administered, or time of maximum concentration of the drug, or level measured before starting any drug, or none of the above. What is trough level? Second question is therapeutic drug monitoring is not usually indicated for which of the following drugs? Phenytoin, lithium, cyclosporine, metoprolol. So when which among this drug does not require or is not indicated to do TDM? Third question is, what is the trial design used to show that a new drug is at least as good as old drug but with reduced adverse effects? Superiority trial, equivalence trial, non-inferiority trial, crossover design. So which is the correct name for this? Fourth question is, which among the following is not true regarding registering in CTRI? Which among the following is not true? So it is mandatory for all clinical trial, should be done after IC approval, before enrolling first patient. It ensures transparency of the trial, can be done at the completion of the study.
There are the various levels of teaching from
Dr. Vigneshan, we lost you again.
Dr. Vigneshwaran, we lost you again.
Yes, yes, he's joining. He's joining.
Yes. So is there any questions or anything to clarify?
Any questions? Any questions, please? If there are no questions, I would like to thank Dr. Vigneshwaran, who has made the whole topic into a very easy one, and most of us have enjoyed it. Thank you, Dr. Vigneshwaran, for your kind class. We'll meet you sometime.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.